Today, we are taking this brand new R1 fuel tank and we are gonna forge carbon skin it.
Yeah.
The first thing you wanna do is you wanna find out where the tank is gonna end and the next body panel is gonna begin. That way you don't have to put extra weight, resin, and carbon on it. So as you can see, the tank line is right there and it goes back like that and then comes up around to where you would sit. So what I'm gonna do is we are gonna mask off everything. I'm gonna run a tape line here, and I'm also going to tape up the inside of the gas tank and basically the outline of everywhere we don't want resin and carbon to stick to, and it'll be a lot cleaner finished product. So let's go ahead and tape this off. And now, as you can see, we have our outline where we don't want resin to stick, we don't want carbon on it, but also when you're sanding it, there's no need to sand any of the good paint and refinish that if it's already in pristine condition. So now what we're gonna do is I'm actually gonna take some 60 grit, and I know what you're thinking, Jay, 60 grit's gonna take the paint right off. We're not trying to take the paint off. We're just trying to scuff the clear coat in the paint enough that the resin will mechanically and chemically bond to it and make it super, super hard and basically as one piece. So another thing is if your tank is any other color than black, or if it's got, primer underneath it or some spots that need to be fixed, what you wanna do is you wanna start with a black base or a black surface. And if you don't have that, what you can do is your resin, you can pigment it with a little bit of black pigment and just make it, that way it'll make it black as a base coat and you won't get any kind of paint or underlying color bleeding through the carbon fiber. It makes it a lot easier, but also you're using less carbon to get coverage. Instead of filling in any kind of voids, it actually masks it very, very well. So let's go ahead and 60 grit this and get this scuffed up and ready for epoxy. Sanded down, denatured alcohol. As you can see, it's dried, but that's what we're looking for. Complete coverage of being scuffed, no glossy spots. And you can see we've got all the way down to the tape line. So now we're gonna mix up some epoxy resin and apply a real thin coat to the tank. I know it's kind of messed up, but this is the black pigment that I use to dye the resins for base coat, so you don't have to buy like a specialty black resin that you'll pay double for. You can buy this, it's like 10, 15 bucks. And one of these will do literally like 2 gallons of epoxy. You just need a little bit. If you guys have any other color tank that you're starting with, you can add that pigment to your first layer of resin to dye it black. So now we're gonna mix up a batch of resin and put a thin coat on. And now we have a gloss black tank again. No, we put a super thin layer of the resin. As you can see, I put a little bit of the black pigment in there just to kind of show you guys how it'll look. Mine may look extra black just because, we did pigment the epoxy. So now what you're gonna do is walk the heck away. Depending on what resin you're using, you should be using the epoxy resin and the carbon fiber kits from Venom Carbon. If you're not, the link is in the description so you could buy your kit today and do these projects on your own. But if you're not using that, follow the instructions, see what your pot time, cure time, all that stuff is on your resin, because that plays the biggest part to make this look perfect. So this has a pot time about 10, 15 minutes, total cure time, couple hours. So the rule of thumb that I use for Venom Carbon resin is about 20, 30 minutes. You'll come back and as you can see, it's super wet, right? You don't hear any tackiness. So let me go ahead and fix that. I just wanted to show you guys. All right, doesn't matter how it really looks, you just wanna make sure it's thin. So you're gonna let it sit about 20, 30 minutes until you come back. You should be wearing gloves anyways. You should be able to touch the surface and it kind of make that. You want that tackiness where it sticks, but you can still leave a fingerprint. And then that's when the fun starts to happen. So walk away from it, let it sit 20, 30 minutes while the resin starts to tack up, and then we'll come back and we'll put our chopped carbon on there. All right, so as you can see, it is nice and tacky. So we have our chopped carbon. This is actually this new design of chopped carbon. It's 1/8 inch, so it's real fine. I don't know if you can tell, but it's super thin strands instead of using like a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, you know, the big chunky strands like what Lamborghini uses. So we're gonna actually test out this new product from Venom Carbon with the 1/8 inch, and I think it's just gonna make it look like a carbon fiber diamond. So now we're gonna sprinkle. And what you want to do is you basically want to take your carbon and you want to sprinkle just enough to get coverage. Rotate it if you need to. Try not to use too much excess, you know, that way you're not wasting money. But we're basically going to cover this whole thing. And then what you'll do is once that's on there, you'll grab a foam brush and you'll dabble it on. So let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, so we have everything covered and now it looks like a furry dog. This is one of the biggest steps that will make your project so easy. If you let the resin tack up, I want to show you where you get these heavy spots like this. What you can do is after it's stuck, after you raise it on there, you can literally take your hand and rub this off the same way when you're applying it. You can put a little bit on and then you can apply it to everywhere. So you can just rub this carbon, get it all nice and tight, kind of rub it around in there just to fill anything. And then what I do is once you got most of this excess off of here, I will actually switch to the foam brush and I'll do that same thing and get all of this extra stuff off of the tank. Another way you can do this is if you get something called peel ply. That's what they use in vacuum bag infusion for carbon fiber parts. If you get peel ply, once you put this on here like this, you can put the peel ply over everything because it'll be kind of sticky. And then you can take a rubber roller and roll it out to where it's perfectly flat. But I don't like doing that method because if you don't get all of this excess off, that's all gonna be high spots in the finished product that you'll have to sand. Nobody likes sanding, so I'm showing you the easiest way to do this without waste and without having to sand so much. So now I'm gonna grab the foam brush and I'm gonna get all these little burrs and all the high spots off, and then we'll get ready for our top coat. It is perfectly flush, almost like this was a sheet of cloth. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this foam brush and I'm basically, it's almost like squeegeeing it. You're pushing down pretty hard because what's happening is because you let that resin tack up, everything is sticking and you're getting 100% coverage, but at the same time, you're pulling any of those loose hairs off of there. I kind of dabble it down. You can see it's gonna make a mess. You're gonna have chopped carbon everywhere, but it gets all of those burrs off of there. And now, once you have it to your liking, where it's perfectly smooth and there's not any more burrs coming off, just like that. Kind of brush down so you're not putting all those loose strands back on your part. You know, push down in here nice and tight. Now what we're gonna do is once we have this perfect like this, we're actually gonna pull all of that tape. Not the gas cap part because the resin's not really touching that, so it won't stick to the blue tape, but we're gonna pull all of this tape off. And then before we put our last 2 coats on there, we're gonna re-tape it off so it doesn't get on the black. But you wanna get this perfectly flat, perfectly smooth, and you wanna take the tape off before this resin cures 100%. So pet your tank or pet your part, whatever you wanna call it, brush it, get all that excess off, and then let's pull the tape. All right, unfortunately I did have a little encapsulation on the blue painter's tape, so I did pull that line. Now you're not pulling all of your tape. You don't wanna have to remask the whole tank or the whole part again. You're only pulling your tape line so you can see you get a nice crispy edge. And if you let this cure or tack up pretty much any further than this, what's gonna happen is it's gonna actually start to pull the resin off instead of letting it chemically and mechanically bond to the part. But you can see exactly where our tape line is. And what I'll do is I'll take that little brush again and I'll hit those corners just so we don't get any burrs or any kind of scragglers sticking around. But as you can see, it already looks freaking amazing. This isn't even glossy yet. Now you could run it like this if you want to. I definitely wouldn't recommend it because you do want to seal it. You know what I mean? This is just raw carbon sitting on top. So of course it's going to absorb any kind of moisture. We get a lot of rain, we get a lot of weather. You don't want this absorbing that. So if you do want it matte, you still have to put the 2 layers of resin on top of this to completely seal it and make it smooth. And then you can sand it down and either spray matte clear or use like a flattening cream. It's just like a, you know, like a rubbing compound, but it actually flattens the clear coat or the paint that you're using it on. Or you can put gloss clear, whatever you want. What we're gonna do is we're trying to keep weight down, and we want this thing to look absolutely gorgeous. So this will be just 2 layers of resin. We're gonna see how the finished product comes out, and then we'll find out if we even need to sand this and polish it. So now we're gonna let this cure completely, and then we'll mask it off again and put our top coats on there. What do you guys think so far? Leave a comment down below. I mean, I know, you know, skinning or carbon veneering might not be your thing. And of course, it's an age-old battle that ever since I created my first forged carbon video, everybody's blown up. That's not real forged carbon. Listen, guys, it's cool. It looks like forged carbon. It's definitely a comma or 2 less money to do it this way if you just want the look. Is there any kind of structural, you know, benefits or advantage by doing this? Hell no. Well, the good thing is on a motorcycle, if you go down, this will actually protect, you know, scratching your tank. But this is literally for fun. And this is just a how-to video and give you guys inspiration on doing these projects yourself. Even if this isn't your thing, you have to appreciate the art and the technique of working with this stuff the right way. And if you've been a subscriber of mine since the beginning, we have come a long way on carbon fiber skinning and building carbon fiber parts. So 2 layers of resin are on there. They're thin, medium coats. You don't want any runs. Like I said, we're trying to prevent the most amount of sanding. And you can see anything with chopped carbon or doing the forged look, you're gonna get kind of like that bumpiness to it. So we've got both of our layers on here. Everything is encapsulated. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this, the same way, we're gonna let it tack off. So about 20 minutes, and then we'll pull the painter's tape again, just so we have a crispy line. And also what you can do is you can take like a torch, you know, something like this, just a regular propane torch, and from very far away, you can go over this just to degas it and get any kind of air bubbles out of there, because they will show up in your finished product. And unfortunately, they are a pain to sand out. So I'm gonna hit this with the torch, get any kind of air bubbles out of there, and then I'm gonna let this cure completely after we pull the tape. I'll let it cure overnight. And then once it cures, we'll mask it off again. And I think we're gonna try to put another layer on here or 2 after we retape it off, and basically do the same exact process we just did. That way we can sand 1 time, flatten this, polish it, everything once. All right, guys, so I was actually able to get 3 coats on here. And what I did was I did 2 hot coats. So a thin layer, let about 5-10 minutes in between, let it tack just slightly. And then I put a second layer, same way, thin to medium coat. And then once I let that tack about 20 minutes, I took another batch of resin and I did a 3rd layer, more like a flow coat. And basically, don't drag your brush against tacky resin because it'll separate it, it'll cause air bubbles, it'll ruin your whole project. So you kind of want to keep the brush nice and wet. So I put that 3rd layer on there nice and wet. And then what I did was I took the brush and just moved it around to where there was no runs. You can actually see it's kind of dripping. You see the drip right there? Yep, it's dripping. So I'm gonna let this sit for about 20-30 minutes until it really starts tacking up nice. Also, it's a good segue. If you wanna know how long it's been and you wanna know how close you are to getting tacky, if you're saving money and you use these red Solo cups, don't use the knockoff ones, but if you're using red Solo cups, you'll notice that the resin will start to get so hot, it'll melt the cup. When that happens, it's usually about 10-15 minutes after you mix a batch, you know that you're within a couple minutes of that resin being tacky enough to either apply your carbon or your next layer of resin. So I just wanted to give you that little tip. But as you can see, it's looking really nice. You can see all the little imperfections to where it's not perfectly smooth. That's fine, because when you're using chopped carbon, the way it absorbs it, it's always gonna have those peaks and valleys, and you're gonna have to sand it to make it perfectly smooth. So now what we're gonna do, let it sit 20, 30 minutes. I'll pull the tape line, and then we'll let it cure overnight. And then I'll come back tomorrow and we'll see if we can just sand it and polish it, or if we're just gonna sand it with like 320 and then do like one final coat of resin on it. So I'll check back in with you after this is cured. So I just pulled the tape. Unfortunately, we did have some bleeding of resin that got through some of the tape. I took some denatured alcohol and just wiped it up. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna be underneath the OEM parts or the aftermarket parts anyways. It's gonna be under the trim, so I'm not too worried about it, but look at how good this is coming out. Like I said, that's 3 coats. So now we'll let it cure overnight, and then I'll come back in the morning and I will tape it up again, get our lines nice and crisp, and then we'll figure out if we're gonna sand and polish it or add one more layer to it. All right, it's the next day. And as you can see, that's a good sign. When you have a really good encapsulation, it should sound like the part underneath and not like a cheap plastic cover. Man, this thing really came out great. If you guys follow these steps, then your parts will look the same exact way, if not better, once you guys get some time under your belt. But don't be afraid to try these projects. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna tape it off again, just like you've seen, and we'll start sanding and polishing this thing and see if we have to put a final layer of resin on here. So I sanded and kind of polished the tank, and I want to let you guys know I use 60 grit dry real lightly just to level it, and then I use 220 wet to get all the scratches out, and then I use another layer of resin. If you're doing this for the first time, or if you're not sure and kind of intimidated by it, start with a 220, even start wet, just so you can kind of see how the resin is going to react. You'll see if it gums up on you, you'll see if it leaves deep scratches. If this is your first time doing it, you don't want to take a chance sanding too much, because once you sand into the chopped carbon, you've got to redo your whole project. So I will tell you guys off camera, I sanded it down, got everything flat, got it looking really, really good. And then I was like, instead of just resining the top, I want to make it easier for you guys so you have an awesome professional finished product. So what I did is, after the 60 grit and then the 220 wet sand, I cleaned everything with acetone, and I took a red pad and I actually scuffed up all the black of the tank, the original color, because I wanted to clear it. And let me tell you, it was the right decision. Look at this. This thing came out absolutely amazing. It's still kind of wet, but I want to show you guys. It is like glass. Once this cures for about an hour, I'll pull it into the sun and make another clip for you. But look at how this came out. You can't even tell really the forged and the shade here, but it just looks absolutely amazing. There's no divots, there's no bubbles, there's no wrinkles. Like I say, it's a little wet, so you kind of see a little bit of orange peel, but if you see the angle of it, it is glass. This thing came out absolutely amazing, and you can see where I scuffed up the bottom and I masked off that line just to keep it crispy and keep it looking good. But this thing is so glossy that the camera doesn't even do it justice. I mean, I'm trying to pick up the forged and it's impossible, because it's like a gloss bowling ball. If you want to do this exactly how I did and use the clear coat, this is what you want. Samurai products are the absolute best aerosol products in the business. I'm not sponsored by them, but I live by it. And when I do projects for you guys, or I do projects for a client, this is the product that I know I can use and not have any bleep ups. You know what I mean? So this is what you want. Yes, it says marine coating, but that's just because it's a lot stronger than your regular automotive. It withstands, the fading, any kind of weather a lot better than your normal 2-part clear coat. I used to use Spray Max 2-part clear. but this product just works so much better in my opinion, and it's a lot more user-friendly. This is 2 coats over the whole thing, and this looks like a tank that was popped out of the mold. I mean, it just looks incredible. What do you guys think? I mean, leave a comment down below if you guys like these videos. We make these videos for you guys to give you inspiration and want to tackle these projects and parts on your own. So leave a comment down below what you guys want to see next. I do think this is steering me towards maybe going forged on the boat. You guys have to leave a comment and let me know. I think it came out absolutely amazing. What do you guys think? Now, let's see it in the sunlight.